So if you're deciding between consulting firms and everyone keeps telling you that McKinsey, Bain or BCG are the absolute best, well that might be true for prestige, but there might be other firms that are also equally good in other domains. Hello everyone, and if you're new here, my name is Jack and I was a former consultant at Bain & Company, and now I run one-on-one coaching sessions to help students get into consulting firms. Now because I was in the consulting industry for over 5 years, naturally I have a lot of thoughts about the different kind of firms. And in today's video, I'm going to be ranking the consulting firms based on 3 categories, right? So prestige, compensation, and also culture. And at the end, I'll combine all of the 3 factors and provide a total ranking based on my opinion as well as some survey data online. By the way, just a quick disclaimer that I don't want this to be just an entertainment video, as ideally I want this to be educational as well, to help inform students that are looking to break into consulting. So by the end, you'll know exactly what firms to target based on what you feel the most important factor is. Now with that being said, let's get straight into the video. So in the first category, we have prestige, and this is all about brand recognition. So how impressive the name sounds to outsiders and the wow factor when you tell people where you work. Now, prestige matters more than people want to admit, as it can affect how recruiters see your resume, how clients perceive you, and yes, it's also good for your ego when your aunties and uncles are impressed at Christmas dinner. So now let's go through and rank the firms in prestige, and FYI, this is based on both my opinion and also information from the Vault website. First, we have D tier, right, which is the big but not prestigious in strategy sense. Here, first of all, I would say we have Deloitte to start off with. Now, yes, it's D for Deloitte. And look, Deloitte is a fantastic firm. They're massive, successful, and a global titan. But when you say I'm a consultant at Deloitte, most people think accounting and technology and not really strategy. So the brand is huge, but not prestigious in the traditional consulting sense. And then in the D tier, we also have PwC and EY. Now, it's the same kind of reasoning as Deloitte. Despite owning strategy and the PwC brand overall screams Big Four accounting, and same for EY, right? They are a safe and respectable brand, but not the prestige of pure strategy firms. Next in the D tier, we also have Accenture. Now, they have the D tier for strategy prestige. Accenture is a massive and incredibly successful firm, and they're probably the biggest consulting firm by revenue, but the brand is firmly on technology and implementation, and not necessarily elite strategy. So even their strategy arm struggles to shake the IT consulting perception. So I'd say they belong in the D tier, which is not a bad brand, it's just a different kind of brand. And last but not least, in the D tier, we have the kpmg. Now, this is the forgotten K of Big Four. They are a solid firm, but probably the least prestigious of the Big Four for consulting. And they are investing to change this, but the brand recognition just isn't there yet. And a lot of the consulting meme pages still make fun of KPMG to this date. All right, now that we have the D tiers, let's move on to the C tier, the respectable but specific firms. First in C tier in terms of prestige, we have Simon Kucher. They're C tier for general prestige, but A tier if we're only talking pricing. They've carved out a specific niche and they own it. So I know they've recently started to invest more heavily into their PE practice and also sustainability, but the reputation is still a pricing consultant, not a general strategy consultant, and therefore less broad prestige as a result. And then in C tier, we also have A&M as well as Alex Partners. Now, they are S tier for restructuring. They are very, very good at what they do. If you tell someone in distress investing or restructuring that you work in A&M or Alex Partners, they will be extremely impressed. But to the general public, not many would have heard of it, and it's almost like being a world champion in a niche sport, right? That's the C tier, and now let's move on to B tier for the well-regarded strategy firms in terms of prestige. First in the B tier, we have Kearney, right? Kearney, which in Europe is more of a B tier because I know they have a much stronger presence in the US, so almost like an A or A plus tier there, but the presence in Europe is more nascent. Even in Korea, where I'm from actually, Kearney is the number 4 firm and we jokingly say MBBK there. So Kearney is a well-respected name in consulting circles with a strong brand in operations and strategy, but prestige in Europe will put them in B tier. Now, next up in B tier, we have Roland Berger. They are globally a B tier, although A tier in Europe and especially Germany probably closer to A plus tier. And this is where geography comes to play, right, in terms of that prestige. Because in Munich or Frankfurt, Roland Berger is prestigious, but in London or New York, people might not know them as much. They are trying to expand their global brand, but it's still very Eurocentric, and a lot of their focus is on the automotive or the manufacturing industry. Next up in B tier, we have OC&C. Now, OC&C has excellent prestige in retail, consumer good, and TMT, so you get to work with luxury brands, major retailers, and consumer tech companies as well. But the brand recognition is niche, and they also have a very strong private equity practice too, but most people haven't heard of them unless they work in professional services. And last but not least, in B tier, we have EY Parthenon. Now, this is the firm that I used to work at. They have a strong prestige in strategy consulting and PE due diligence, and they are an absolute S tier when it comes to education sector. And to be honest, in my 2 years at Parthenon, I'd say I spent around 70% of my time doing an education project. Parthenon used to be much stronger of a boutique, but since the EY brand merger, it did give them scale, but also it diluted the pure strategy mystique slightly, I'd say. Now, moving on to A tier, which is the highly prestigious in consulting circles. Firstly, we have Strategy and. Now, the Boo's legacy carries some serious weight, but being part of PwC means some people will confuse them with general PwC consulting. Although the line between Strategy and PwC is increasingly becoming more blurred, it is still a very prestigious firm to those who know. Next up in A tier, we have LEK. Now, if you say I work at LEK to someone in healthcare or private equity, they would be impressed. However, to my aunt who sells airplanes, she'll ask if you're working for a tech startup. On a serious note though, LEK is very prestigious and probably the top firm when you talk about healthcare and life sciences. Lastly, in A tier, you have Oliver Wyman. A tier firm overall, but S tier actually if you're only talking about financial services, because they have a very strong FS practice, so in banking circles, it is extremely prestigious. But again, it's a very much an if you know, you know situation to the general public. Now, finally in the S tier, we have the untouchables, McKinsey, Bain, and BCG. The big three MBB consulting firms belong in this tier. Now, look, there's just no debate here, right? These three are in the stratosphere of their own. If you say you work at any of these firms, people are immediately impressed. I mean, your parents will brag about you, your auntie will be impressed, and your LinkedIn gets flooded with recruiter messages and 10 plus students reaching out to you every day. Now, out of these three, I would say McKinsey probably edges the other two by about 5% in pure brand recognition. They are the undisputed king or queen of consulting prestige. Founded in 1926, they've advised 85 of the world's 100 largest corporations, and McKinsey alumni hold CEO or chairman positions of 10 plus companies in the FTSE 100. So when most people think elite consulting, they're thinking of McKinsey, which is why they call themselves the firm, right? And the name McKinsey carries weight everywhere from boardrooms all the way to Downing Street as well. And then we have BCG, which was founded by a former McKinsey consultant in 1963. They're known for innovation and thought leadership as they literally invented the growth share matrix. They are also extremely prestigious, especially in tech circles, and they're expected to actually surpass McKinsey's revenue by 27. Last but not least, we have Bain, the youngest of MBB, founded in 1973. Bain built their reputation on results-based consulting and deep client relationships, and they're also known as the nice MBB, but don't let that fool you because the brand power is elite. They are an unquestioned leader in the private equity industry with over 20,000 diligences completed since the year 2000, having advised over 50% of the largest buyouts globally. Now, here's the truth about prestige, right? This is my take on prestige. I'd say it's relative and it's temporary, right? Relative in the sense that, let's say, for example, A&M and Alex Partners have a C-tier broad prestige, but S-tier prestige in restructuring circles. And Oliver Wyman is A-tier overall, but arguably equals MBB in financial services. So the context matters too. And then when I say temporary, I'm talking about the fact that prestige matters most in your, say, first 3 to 5 years, because it opens doors, it gets you interviews, and it impresses people too. But after you've built your own track record, it kind of matters matters less because your actual skills and your network, as well as your project results, they are the ones that become way more important. So if you're deciding between firms and prestige is your number one concern, well, you have the answer here where MBB is the S tier. But if you want to do the structuring, then maybe A&M or Alex Partners might serve you better despite the lower broad prestige. And if you want to do financial services, Oliver Wyman's niche prestige might matter more than BCG's broad prestige. So don't just chase prestige for prestige's sake, and think about prestige where it matters for your goals. Alright, now let's move on to category 2, which is compensation. And this is where things get spicy because the prestige rankings may not match the pay ranking. And let me give you the indicative figures for the first year analysts and consultants in the UK, and for US, just add about 30 or 50% to these numbers. Right, first of all, in the D tier, well, actually, I don't think any consulting firms are in the D tier for compensation, as they all pay above the national average salary, so let's go into the C tier straight away. So the C tier here is decent, but not competitive pay. In the C tier, we have the Big Four general consulting, because if you're not in their strategy practice, you're looking at 30 to 40,000 total compensation in your first year, which is still good money for a graduate, but it's not the premium that strategy consulting commands. And then we also have Accenture in the C tier, and I would say probably C plus tier, as it pays slightly higher than the Big Four, around 35 to 40,000 pound total compensation in your first year. And my understanding is that you also get stock bonuses at Accenture, which can stack up your total compensation. Now in the B tier, we have a great pay firms, and this is where most of the specialist strategy firms will be placed. So let's say firms like Roland Berger might be here, Simon Kucher might be here, Kearney as well in the UK, and as well as Alex Partners and A&M might also belong in the B tier. These firms will pay a base between 40 to 45,000, with bonuses around 5 to 10 on top, bringing the total compensation close to 50,000 pounds in your first year as an analyst or more. And it's a very competitive salary still, and just below the top tier 2 firms. And then to be honest, I would say A tier and S tier is very much mixed, because all the top tier 2 strategy firms and MBB will pay a similar base and bonus at least in the first year. So let's say, for example, EY Parthenon, let's say Strategy Ann, Oliver Wyman, and LEK as well. I mean, these firms will pay a base around 50 to, let's say 55k base, and a bonus of 5 to 10k on top. And the pay is very competitive as they try to compete with the likes of MBB. And I would say MBB also kind of belongs in, I missed out on CNC, my bad. And I would say MBB also kind of belongs in A tier for the analyst position. And McKinsey actually has the lowest salary of the MBB because their prestige makes up for it, I guess. And now that being said, let's look at the salary progression and say year 3 salary, for instance. In that case, I would obviously put MBB at a different bucket, so at the S tier level. And this is because year 3 salary comparison for MBB would be around 130 to 150k total compensation, versus in the A tier or B tier, the compensation might be between 95 to 120k. And then for Big Four and Accenture in the C tier, it would be around 70 to 90,000 pounds. So this is what the pay scale might look like as you climb up the ladder. Now here's my take on pay, right? If maximizing earnings is your number one priority, then most firms, including MBB and tier 2 strategy firms, pay very competitively for the first few years, and the gap isn't life challenging, but by year 3 onwards, the MBB premium will compound significantly. Also, just to note that all of these are actually high paying careers, right? Even in the B tier, it is still the top 10% of graduate salaries, so don't just choose a firm that you'll hate just for that extra 5k. Alright, and last but not least, we have category 3, which is culture. Now this is very subjective and it varies by office, but I'm going to give you the general consensus based on my experience, conversations with consultants, as well as the Vote Best Workplace survey. Now culture will include things like work-life balance, how supportive your colleagues are, and employee satisfaction as well. And for this, I actually wanted to start with the S tier, which has the best culture, and that is undoubtedly Bain & Company. You've guessed it correctly. And yes, you might say that I'm biased, but actually Bain is S tier from the consensus view as well. Bain has the best culture amongst a lot lot of consulting firms, it's also known as the nice MBB, so more collaborative and less cutthroat. And we literally have a phrase that says, a bainey never lets another bainey fail. They invest quite heavily in collaboration, team bonding, and genuinely care about employee well-being. And so the bainey culture, it is real, evident in Glassdoor, Volt, and any other metric out there. And then we have A tier, which has also a great and amazing culture. First in A tier, we have Oliver Wyman, right? They are ranked number 3 in the Volt's best place to work list, and they have an excellent culture that is less hierarchical, more collaborative, and generally better hours as well compared to MBB. People genuinely seem quite happy there, and they're known to staff consultants on projects that best suit their talents, so they belong in the A tier. Next up in the A tier, we have BCG. Now, BCG has good culture, you have professional, smart colleagues, and a decent support system as well, but it is a bit more intense than Bain, based on a few of my friends working there, although they are more flexible than McKinsey, for instance. And then lastly, in the A tier, we have Kearney. Now, Kearney is known to have very solid culture, less pressure than MBB, and more reasonable hours, in Europe at least. And Kearney in particular actually is known for being that friendly and collaborative consultant friend. Moving on to B tier, this is where the firms have a decent culture. Now, I put most of the smaller tier 2 firms here because there are smaller organizations, the culture will be more tight-knit, and there may be greater emphasis of fitting in the culture in your interviews. So let's say firms like A&M, for example, Alex Partners, we also have Roland Berger, and to be honest, like even Simon Kucher will fit into B tier as well. And I would say like Strategy and EY Parthenon also fits in here. Culture itself is pretty good, but it's in a weird spot being part of PwC and EY, but a separate entity, right? So some people love that, others find it confusing navigating the dual identity. Again, I keep forgetting OCNC. Really big apologies for that. They should really be in B tier as well. Now moving on to C tier, which is the work is work category. Now, in the C tier, first of all, I'm going to put McKinsey here. Some people might say it's controversial placement, but just hear me out for a second, right? McKinsey has the prestige and probably arguably the smartest people, let's say, but the culture is the most intense among MBB. They are the most hierarchical, most political, and most stressful as well in terms of navigating the workplace environment. And the up or out culture is real and brutal at McKinsey. So if you thrive under pressure and want to be around the absolute best, you will love it, but it's not for everyone. Another one in the C tier, we have LEK. Historically, they were known to be more of a DD sweatshop with high turnover rates than other tier 2 consulting firms. That being said, the culture has gotten significantly better in recent years with a strong office culture and many social events to foster strong relationships, so-called. So it could potentially be moving up more towards the B tier, but I'm going to put C tier for now based on its historical name. And then in the C tier, we also have the Big Four. Now, look, I'm going to say that Big Four really depends very much on your specific team, because you could get an amazing manager and a team, or you could get stuck on a 18-month implementation project with awful hours as well. So because it is very dependent on project, I'm going to put that on C tier. And now you might be wondering who's on D tier. Well, it's actually Deloitte for D. I'm just kidding. Actually on D tier, I was going to put Accenture, but I think Accenture is also more of a C tier as well. In Accenture, you're part of a huge organization, which has pros and cons, right? And the culture is also kind of very churn and burn with more limited promotion opportunities these days, I hear. So higher turnover and less investment in individuals. And given that it is a massive organization, you can feel like you're a bit more of a number. That being said though, if you find the right team and the right people at Accenture, it can also be an amazing experience for many new students starting out their journey. Now, my take on culture is that this is the category where people make mistakes because they chase prestige or pay and ignore the culture, but then they churn out in 18 months, right? So here's my advice to all the students out there. Talk to people who actually work at the firm, not the recruiters and not the glossy marketing, but actual consultants, and ask them, because culture is where you live every single day. A slightly less prestigious firm with much better culture that fits your personality type might make you significantly happier. And happiness and being around people you truly enjoy working with matters way more than you think when you're in your second year and you're working your 70th hour of the week. Alright, let's put this all together now. So if I had to create an overall ranking considering all three categories, here is how I would tier them. So overall in S tier, we obviously have Bain because they are the best all round. S tier prestige, S tier pay, and S tier culture as well. So essentially, it's a triple S. And if you can apply it to only one firm, you should make it Bain. I'm kidding, of course, because I'm biased, but you get the gist. Bain is an amazing company, and I'm truly grateful for my time at Bain. Now, next up in the S tier, we obviously also have BCG. They have the highest pay, the elite prestige and exit opportunities, and a very, very solid culture as well. And if you love being surrounded by smart, academic, and intellectual consultants, and don't mind the fast-paced culture, BCG is an absolute S tier as well. And then last but not least, we also have our McKinsey on S tier, although I would say they're more like an S- tier maybe to an extent, because in terms of prestige and exit opportunities, they are going to be an S++ tier, right? They're going to beat out Bain and BCG by far. But if you include the culture as well, I think it just falls into that S tier bucket. So if you want the most impressive brand and don't mind the intense culture, go for McKinsey, but just know what you're signing up for. And then in the A tier, we have, starting up with Oliver Wyman overall. They are a top A-tier firm with an AAA rating across our three categories, followed by EY Parthenon, Strategy and I would say Kearney as well. These are all very excellent choices, so slightly less prestige than MBB, but often better culture, very good pay, and strong exits as well. I'd say like LEK would also be A as well, like kind of like A- or B+, given that yes, they pay well and they are prestigious in healthcare and PE work, but culture is slightly more hardcore and intense versus the other tier 2 firms up here. Overall, then moving on to the B tier, we've got OCNC, Simon Kucher, Alex Partners, and A&M as well, Roland Berger. Now, I would say these are all the very, very solid firms with strong niches, right? So lower prestige externally and slightly lower pay, but if you are passionate about their specific focus and niche area, then they can be a really great fit for you. And then in the overall C tier, we have Accenture, first of all, as well as EY, PwC, and Deloitte as well, and KPMG, let's say too. So obviously these firms will provide you with a solid training ground and a decent pay, but they're a bit more limited on prestige and those elite exit opportunities. These firms are amazing if you want a more sustainable lifestyle, although that can still depend on the project itself. Alright guys, well that's my complete consulting firm tier list across prestige, pay, and culture. And I know some of these rankings will be controversial, especially putting McKinsey in the sort of the lower tier for culture, or saying that Bain is the absolutely best firm. Of course, it is a bit of a bias as well because I worked at Bain, but it is also based on my experience as well as talking to consultants and also the general consensus from the Vault Prestige rankings as well. So if you found this helpful, please do hit that like button and subscribe. I'm going to be making videos about consulting careers, case interviews, and also industry knowledge every single week. So if you're interested, please do stay tuned. And lastly, if you are applying to any of these firms and want help with your applications, whether that be networking, case prep, check out CaseBuddy in the description because I do offer one-on-one coaching to help you land offers at MBB and top consulting firms. And last but not least, guys, please drop a comment below in terms of which firm surprised you most in these rankings and which tier list do you care about the most. Is it prestige, pay, culture, or exit opportunities? And which firm are you targeting and why? And if you disagree with any of them, I'm very, very happy to have a conversation about it. Again, guys, thank you so much for watching and good luck with your applications. And remember, there is no perfect firm, and instead it is perfect if you are very happy with all the aspects of that specific firm.